There is a man who was told he would never make it, who wore a number he never even chose, and who made an entire city fall in love with him over 21 years. And if you think you know how this story ends, stay right here, because the part that nobody talks about is the part that will genuinely change how you see what it means to start over. But before we continue, tell us where you are watching from so we can send you a heart.
Imagine being told at the age of 19 that you are not good enough. Imagine flying thousands of miles away from your home, your family, and everything familiar, only to land in a city where nobody knows your name, and the few people who do are already betting against you. Now imagine that the only number left for your jersey, the number you were essentially forced to take because a veteran refused to give up his, becomes the very number that one day stops a whole city in its tracks and rises into the rafters of an arena while 20,000 people wipe tears from their eyes. That is the story of the number 41. And if you think a number is just a number, you have never watched what one man did with it over 21 years.
Dirk Werner Nowitzki was born on June 19, 1978, in Würzburg, Germany, a small city more associated with wine festivals and Baroque architecture than professional basketball. He did not pick up a basketball seriously until he was in his early teens, which in the world of elite sports development is considered dangerously late. Most future professionals are already in specialized academies by that age, being groomed, measured, and molded. Dirk was still figuring out if he even liked the game. What saved him was a chance encounter with a man named Holger Geschwindner, a former German national team player who had studied mathematics, physics, and movement science. Geschwindner saw something unusual in the lanky teenager, not just height, but a fluidity in his shooting motion that seemed almost impossible to teach. He took Dirk under his wing, and together they began building something the basketball world had genuinely never seen before. By the time Dirk was playing for DJK Würzburg in the German basketball leagues, wearing the number 14 on his back in honor of his idol Charles Barkley from the 1992 Barcelona Olympics Dream Team, scouts across the Atlantic were starting to whisper his name. He was a 7-footer who could shoot off the dribble, knock down three-pointers with mechanical precision, and read the floor with the instincts of a point guard. In 1998, he entered the NBA draft projected as a top 10 pick, which was remarkable for a European teenager who had never played a single college game in America. The Milwaukee Bucks selected him with the 9th pick, then immediately traded him to the Dallas Mavericks as part of a multi-team deal that also brought a young point guard named Steve Nash to Texas. Neither player knew it then, but both would one day become MVPs of the entire league. When Dirk landed in Dallas, he wanted his number 14. It felt like home. It was the number he had worn while representing Germany internationally, the number that tied him to Barkley, the number that carried his whole basketball identity. But a veteran guard named Robert Pack was already wearing 14 and made it plain he was not handing it over to any rookie, let alone a foreign one. So Dirk, with the kind of quiet practicality that would define his entire career, simply flipped the digits. 14 became 41. He laughed about it later, noting that it worked out perfectly since he wore 14 for Germany and 41 in America. But at the time, it was just a number on a jersey. He had no idea what that number was about to become. His first NBA season was a struggle. The game was faster, the bodies were bigger, and the pounding was relentless in ways that European basketball simply could not prepare you for. He averaged only 8.4 points per game as a rookie, and there were genuine questions about whether he belonged at this level. Critics, some of them loud in public, called him soft. They said European players could not handle the physicality of the NBA. They said he would never be more than a role player. What those critics underestimated was the thing Holger Geschwindner had seen in a gymnasium in Würzburg years earlier, which was a young man who processed failure as information rather than defeat. Every bad game, every missed shot, every critic's column became fuel that Dirk fed quietly into the engine of his preparation. By his third season, something had shifted. The numbers were climbing and the basketball world was beginning to pay attention in a different way. He had developed what would become one of the most iconic and imitated shots in the history of the sport. a one-legged fadeaway jump shot that was essentially impossible to block. The mechanics of it defied conventional wisdom. Coaches will tell you that fading away from the basket reduces your accuracy. They will tell you that standing on one leg while shooting reduces your stability. What they could not account for was Dirk Nowitzki, because for him, that shot was automatic. It became his signature, his weapon, and eventually, his art form.
The Dallas Mavericks grew into a powerhouse built almost entirely around number 41. They made the playoffs consistently, and in 2006, they reached the NBA Finals for the very first time in franchise history. They were heavily favored against the Miami Heat. They led the series 2-0. And then, in one of the most dramatic reversals in finals history, they lost 4 games in a row, and the championship slipped away. For most players, that kind of collapse stays with them like a shadow. For Dirk, it became the defining fire that refined everything. He did not hide from it. He did not ask for trades or demand a super team. He went back to work, back to Holger, back to the gym, while carrying the weight of that loss on his own shoulders in a city that had placed enormous faith in him.
5 years later, in 2011, the Mavericks went back to the finals. This time, they faced the Miami Heat again, a team assembled with enormous fanfare and practically coronated before a single game was played. LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh had formed what many considered an unbeatable combination, and the basketball world largely agreed. What the basketball world had not factored in adequately was a 7-foot German man wearing number 41 who had been waiting precisely for this moment for the better part of a decade. Dirk averaged 26 points per game in that series, played with a torn tendon in his finger, and in the closing moments of elimination games, he was utterly fearless. Dallas won the championship in 6 games. Dirk was named Finals MVP. He went into the bathroom and cried alone before celebrating with his teammates, because, as he explained later, he needed a private moment for something that personal. The years that followed tested him in new ways. Age brought injuries, and the roster around him thinned. The Mavericks had difficult seasons, and there were voices suggesting he should join a contender, that he had earned the right to chase another ring somewhere with more talent surrounding him. He stayed. He always stayed. Through rebuilding years and losing records, and the kind of humbling reality that follows a championship when you are also the franchise cornerstone, Dirk put on that number 41 jersey and showed up. Not because the contract required it, but because he believed something about loyalty that went beyond transaction. In a professional sports landscape where players frequently move teams in pursuit of glory or money, his commitment to Dallas was genuinely unusual, and many people found it beautiful precisely because of that. He retired on April 10, 2019, at the American Airlines Center in Dallas after a final home game. He walked back onto the court after the game, took the microphone, and said goodbye to the city that had become his home over 21 years. The building shook. On January 5, 2022, the Mavericks retired his number 41 in a ceremony that brought back teammates, coaches, and the NBA commissioner himself. The banner rose slowly into the rafters while Dirk stood at Stetson Court with his wife and 3 children, holding himself together for most of his speech until the very end, when the emotion finally broke through. His mentor Holger Geschwinder sat in the front row, the same man who had seen a teenager in a gym in Würzburg and decided to bet everything on him, was there to watch the number rise. What Dirk Nowitzki did for number 41 is the same thing every truly great athlete does for whatever they wear. He made it mean something. He took a number he settled for because a veteran refused to budge, and he turned it into a symbol of everything that is possible when talent meets the kind of preparation and commitment that most people simply are not willing to sustain. He was inducted into the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame in 2023, the first German player ever enshrined, and only the 4th Dallas Maverick to have his jersey retired. His career points total of 31,560 places him 6th on the all-time NBA scoring list, and he did it all with one team, one city, one number. The lesson in that, if you are willing to receive it, is that sometimes the number you end up with is not a consolation. Sometimes it is the beginning of something you could never have planned for yourself. If you made it this far, it means you are the kind of person who appreciates a story worth telling, and that means everything. So thank you for watching. And also do well to like, subscribe, and drop a comment so we can see you in the next video. Bye for now.